Hi guys, Andy Ed, spoken label, back in the house on Tuesday evening. It's lovely out there this evening as well, which is ironic because it pissed it down when I left work before as well. I got drenched going home. But anyway, off to one of my favourite areas in the world today, actually. And I grew up in this area. And this young lady with me today actually is originally from the Altrincham area, but she's now living in near where I grew up in Urmston. Yeah, in South Manchester. So a lovely young lady called Lauren Temple. And I got talking to Lauren fairly recently after coming across by chance on Instagram a few of her poems and video. I'm really impressed with them. And she's kind of talked to me today. So Lauren, obviously, people who don't know you, give us a spiel then. Who are you? What started off your creativity? And we'll start from there.
So I'm a writer from Manchester. I mostly write poetry, but I'm trying to write a book, which I don't talk about as much. And yeah, what started my creativity? I mean, I've always wrote. It's actually only fairly recently I started writing poetry though. Like 4 years ago, I started going to Young Identity, and I went there so it's like a writing group in Manchester. And the first time I went there, I never actually wrote a poem before. I'd only started writing books and then never finished them. So yeah, that got me started in poetry at least.
Yeah, it probably just came kind of naturally then, really, didn't it? So yeah. So obviously then, were you writing? Obviously, these are aborted books, and that's probably the best way to put it. Because I've got loads of aborted novels knocking around. But were you trying to write these when you were very young? Then, basically, were you originally?
Yeah, there was one story that I did finish. It was quite short. It was definitely a short story, and it was when I was 10, I think, and it won a Blue Peter badge, which I was very proud of at the time. I think they just gave them out for anything. It was literally about a dog called Custard, and he was called Custard because he spilt a can of custard on his head and got covered in custard. Peak creativity. No, but as a kid, my dream was that I wanted to be the world's youngest author. I think I had in my brain that the world's youngest author was 16 or something. Never was. Unless you count Blue Peter Badger's publication.
It's got to be done. It's got to be done. That brilliant. Was it when you were growing up? Then was there any writers made you want to become a writer?
I think that's a good question actually, because when I was in primary school, I actually hated reading.
Did you? Oh wow.
Yeah, because I'm dyslexic and I was really far behind. They were still giving me Biff and Chip when I was in year 6 and it was obviously really boring and childish. But then when I went in secondary school, could pick my own books, and I started reading stuff like Jacqueline Wilson that everyone was reading, which is great, don't get me wrong, but also books that were way too difficult for me. I was reading H.G. Wells and stuff like that.
Oh my good grief.
I couldn't understand half of it. I had to keep asking my mum for every other word, but I just found the stories so fascinating. And I started to try and write sci-fi and stuff myself based off that.
Ah, right, yeah. Yeah, I think it comes naturally sometimes, doesn't it? When it's obviously when you're that sort of age, you're trying to write. I grew up a lot of the pulp science fiction stuff myself, and I remember hating reading H.G. Wells when I was about 12 or 13. And I've still got some of my very early stories in those days, and they're terrible, really bad. But
dude, I haven't read them in a long time, so they might be bad. Yeah. I don't know.
God. Worst thing I've got is I started writing poetry when I was 10. Would you believe? This is 40 odd years ago now, and I've still got those poems because I've got all my poems here in little A5 hardback books, and I've got a lot of them. But it's sometimes it's fun to go back and reread some of these and thinking, what drugs was on when I wrote some of them? You wonder sometimes, you know what I mean, don't you? So.
I started writing this book when I was, let's say, 14. I remember it was called The Unconquered Reality, and it was a dystopian science fiction. And I read it back recently, and it sounds like a fan fiction. The main character falls in love with this emo boy, because it was 2014. So honestly, it's so cringeworthy.
Oh no, but I think there's a saying going around for a band called The Fall. Have you heard of the Marquis Smith's band? To be good at something, you've got to do rubbish first.
Yeah.
So I think you have to learn from it. Definitely that. So your case was, I think you seemed like you seemed to get more serious about your work when you joined Young Identity, didn't you, at the time?
Yeah, it's been really good for opportunities. I think I just saw it on Home's website, the Theatre Home, and I went with my friend, and yeah, since then it's been great. performed at loads of shows with them. Like I've got like paid gigs with them, and I published in their anthology, Ecosystems of Fury. That's their last one. And yeah, it's really great for opportunities. Like I feel like if I hadn't have gone to that club, I don't know where like my writing would be right now, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Sometimes you need that little bit of focus, and that sort of thing can help you out a lot with that. I think I got mine really when I started my first thing when I went to uni. I was at Bolton Uni from 98 to 2001, and I joined a writing group in Bolton, which is well gone now. About 4 or 5 years later, so I meandered for a few years myself. And sometimes is that joining that right group at the right time in your life makes a big difference, really, doesn't it? So
yeah, I mean, uni helped a little bit as well, because even though I did English and drama, but I could take some creative writing modules. It was pretty flexible. They just had to be kind of drama too. So I did script writing, and I've actually wrote a play which I will one day edit and put on, and it's actually one day.
I like that word, one day.
It's actually about dyslexia. It's like inspired by my dad's childhood. So that was very rewarding to write. I did another piece, actually a short story about my dad and dyslexia, and for that one, which then inspired this play, I like did an interview with him, and I then like paraphrased a lot of the things he said. So I had it in his voice, and yeah, it was really good to hear, because even though I've like always struggled with dyslexia, like my dad literally left school when he was 14 because like he was just getting called stupid by the teachers, getting beaten by the teachers, like all this horrible stuff. Yeah. So now he hates teachers. Like
you tend to normally after that, yeah.
But it was really good for me to kind of talk to him about that, and I think it was weirdly quite therapeutic for like the both of us.
Yeah, no, you told me off mic before, and obviously I want to talk about it a bit more with you, because I didn't know this obviously before. You've obviously seen that Poem Man and a Poem Man in the Flapjack Press book, and you can show it, but I forgot the name of it.
Neurodiverse. I love this book so much. I think I've got a couple of chapters left, but yeah.
I didn't actually know you were dyslexic, actually, let alone dyspraxic. You told me just a mic before, so. But I think this book's been really good, because like people know that I've diagnosed when I was 28 with it. So when did you find out you were actually dyslexic and dyspraxic?
So dyslexia I've always known. I think they must have diagnosed me really young, because I've never like not known it. But dyspraxia was only when I went to university, because they were like retesting me for dyslexia, and I didn't even know what the thing was. At first they told me it was just like clumsiness, and now I know that it's more than that. It's like, to do with like more than just like physical coordination. It's like mental coordination as well. I'm really glad I did get diagnosed though, because there's just so many little things that like for so long I was just like calling myself stupid for, without realizing that it's like not really my fault. It's just kind of a part of me.
Yeah, it all is really, because like it was I had a number of history when I was at uni, and when I went to go sit in a chair, I've missed a chair and hit the floor, or in some cases bounce off the chair, land on the table, and knock myself out.
We have a joke at work that every time I'm on shift I accidentally kick a Zimmer frame. No one's attached to the Zimmer frame. They're like laid out, but I'm like, oh my god. I can't. But they should make me take like a wheelchair license test, like because I have to be so careful, because I'm like, you have to put like extra effort into like coordination.
We're probably best telling people what your job is as well.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, we don't need to name where, but I know you're an activities coordinator, aren't you? For a certain person, older person's home.
Yeah, it's a care home. Yeah,
care homes. Yeah, it's fair enough. So, which is interesting, really, like, because when you're doing that sort of role, where you've got to have like some kind of coordination, but you don't have it at all, really.
I just have to concentrate really hard, and like a lot of the time I'll ask someone to help me, honestly it's just like concentrating really really hard to make sure, because obviously you might want to do safe and stuff, because they're the ones that struggle with coordination as well, obviously, because they're older. But yeah, I'm fine most of the time, as long as I just concentrate on what I'm doing. Then
how does this reflect in your work now? Then obviously you found out about the dyspraxia and dyslexia, then, because I know when I was at uni, I really struggled the first year and a half of essays. But I learned basically to train myself to work probably 3 times as hard as everybody else to get my work done, and then the creative stuff. Has that happened to you then, has it really, since you joined Young Identity?
Well, at uni, I actually I ended up getting like an editor like for my essays, which was so helpful. Oh my gosh. it meant that like I could, like, my words were reflected rather than my spelling mistakes, if that makes sense. So that was really good. Like at work, I don't know if it really affects me much at work. I just kind of laugh at myself whenever I spell something wrong and tell everyone I'm dyslexic and it's fine and they don't care. I found at Young Identity, so like a lot of writers are neurodiverse in some way. Like Shirley, who runs Young Identity, is dyslexic as well. So that's quite relatable, having her being dyslexic as well. But yeah, I don't know. It's not really been a negative thing since I've kind of left education. It's just been kind of a part of my life. And honestly, if anything, is a positive thing. Sometimes because of my dyslexia, I accidentally make up words and I use them in my poems.
Join the club with that completely. Is that I seem to do that myself, where a lot of the time I end up structuring sentences in no way they should be there, or mixing images up, and you're right, it's not making words up. In my case, it's giving something of such an unusual structure in a poem. People saying afterwards, that's incredible, how do you manage that? And you can't tell people it's a complete accident, can you?
Honestly, I just assume certain words are words, and then I have to be told, someone's like, Lauren, that's not a word, and I'm like, well, does it make sense to you? And they're like, yeah, and I'm like, okay, that works then. Like I love turning like just normal words like into verbs, you know what I mean, like into like doing words. I love doing that.
Brilliant.
I wanted to say as well, that poem that you wrote as part of the collection, I want to show my dad that, because I think he'll find that really relatable.
Sure. Show Dad it. Get me. He wants to talk to me. Get him to speak. Him, drop me a message.
Yeah.
I said,
he's not normally into poetry, but I think he'd like that one, definitely.
Yeah, my piece in that book, people are wondering, was talking about my life the way it was. Where, like, I had a nightmare childhood in some ways, because I got to the end of the school, I got to stay 16, unlike your dad, really. But my grades just nosedived because I gave up, because it was just I'm not in a good place at the time. So it took me probably to do some years later to pull myself out, when it's easier said than done sometimes, I think that.
Oh, definitely, yeah, definitely.
I like it. It's a case like your dad. I don't know how old your dad is. He's probably
he's in his 60s.
Oh yeah, he was older than me then. So yeah, he would have had it twice as bad as me then, because it was bad enough when I was in the 80s at school. Like your dad's case of in the 70s, we really had it bad. So yeah, no, I get it completely.
Yeah, it was very bad.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Now, obviously, talk about yourself. I want to talk about some bits and pieces there. Now, on your Linktree page, I know you've got a really good poem of yours up there called "She Made Her Own Wedding Dress."
Oh yeah, that one.
I want you to talk about that first of all, because I think that's a really good poem straight away.
Thank you. Yeah, that was inspired by my nan. I'm actually, the book that I'm writing is also inspired by her and my mum. So my nan actually passed away in 2020, and we were looking after her, and she had dementia. So it was kind of like quite odd, because, you know, all of a sudden we've got someone around us all the time, and then she passed away. And as well, I kind of had like, I don't know if it comes across in this poem exactly, but I write about it a lot, is that I had a bit of a difficult relationship with my nan, because she wasn't a very nice person, and everyone was like, oh, that's because she's got dementia. I'm like, no, she got nicer with the dementia.
Yeah.
She was just the kind of person that would, like, you go out to a restaurant and she'd be like, look at that woman over there, how can she come dressed like that? You know, like, she'd just be openly like rude.
Yeah, I've got my ex was like that, which is terrible with that. So, but anyway, listen, we'll move it on, because I'm not going to get sued.
Oh my god. But anyway, so that's like the picture of what my nan was like. But the poem is kind of basically about this idea of like inherited like grief, like being passed down, because in the poem it kind of talks about how her husband died, and I don't, it's not really explicit in the poem, but basically my granddad, her husband, passed away while she was pregnant with my mum.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So my mum never got to meet her dad. So I kind of wanted to kind of explore how like that relationship and that person can be passed down even though that person's not there. It's like the idea of the wedding dress. It's almost like this physical embodiment of the grief, and, you know, it being passed down. And even when my nan's passed away, at the end of the poem, the wedding dress is still there. Like, I've still got that, even though she's gone. And my only bit of him left, the man I never met, was her. And now that she's gone, it's like all I have are these things, these objects of the both of them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It's a bit of background noise here, yeah. No, it's the memories of anything that you do. Like, I've got ornaments knocking on both my grandparents, and even something of my great grandmum. And it's these sort of things you hang on to when you get older, I think. And it's, like I said, it's something that may mean nothing to somebody else means the world to you sometimes, I think. Definitely that. Now, I want to talk about a few bits and pieces on your creativity on your website as well, because give people a bit of understanding of you as a person as well. Now, I know you did Distant Libraries, Manchester City's of Literature's Festival of Libraries in 2020.
That was
Tell us about the experience of that then, first of all, next time.
Yeah, no, that was really fun. It was like a series of workshops that we worked on where we were exploring like the idea of what a library is and what a library should be. And then when we actually did the event, it was both like a poetry event, but also like the audience were very much like a part of it, as in a discussion about what they think libraries should be, like what should be in a library space, what would make libraries better. And it was such an interesting event. And quite interestingly, we were talking about dyslexia. I ended up reading a poem about dyslexia for that, about how, I can't remember, were we talking about this when we were recording or not, about how I wasn't allowed to pick my own books in primary school? I can't remember recording or not.
I have no idea. Dyspraxia alert. And also Jack's shit brain memory as well. Okay. So
well, yeah, basically the poem was about how I used to hate reading because I wasn't given a choice. I was very limited because of my reading skills. But once I was able to pick my own books and read stuff that was way too hard for me, that's when I actually fell in love with reading. So the poem kind of explores that, and how somewhere like a library could be like a horrible space for me. If I'd let that whole thing of struggling with words kind of consume my love for literature, then a library would have been like a horrible place, whereas now a library is a sanctuary.
No, I agree. I agree completely with you in that one. So no, brilliant. Now, also as well on your website, there's a couple of things I want to talk about next as well. I know you did cabaret, or get it right now, because I get my words wrong now. Cabaret for Freedom at Manchester Literature Festival in last year, actually. So what happened there then?
Oh, that was a really good event. Do they do it every single year or every few years? I can't remember.
I've heard of it. I've got the thing I've read it a couple of years ago myself. It just definitely rings a bell.
I can't, because I know obviously COVID disrupted how often we did it. No, that was a really great event. I ended up reading a poem for that called Helianthus, which is inspired by the residents at my care home, and it's about dementia. And that was a really good event. Like, I loved that it was near Old Trafford, so it was kind of not in the city like a lot of poetry events, which was really good. Yeah, it was really good, because like we actually had it was really nice at the end. My mum overheard this family who said, they were like confused. They were like, "What's going on here?" We just live across the road and we just walked in because we saw the lights on. And I just love that, like this like this family just like, they weren't coming for a poetry event. They just like saw the lights were on in the church and was like, "Oh, let's have a look." Like I love that so much, because I feel like poetry can be seen as this kind of what's the word I'm looking for, like exclusive, like a kind of like pretentious, or like kind of almost like VIP space. And I'm like, no, it's poetry's for everyone, you know what I mean?
No, I agree. I think it has to be like, and there is a problem with that sometimes when in times gone past it was regarded as like rock and roll music obviously changed the way people deliver words and stuff. And I think poetry's probably took 40-50 years to catch up to that stage. So yeah, I agree with you. Now, more recently as well, obviously this year alone, I know you've been at Chalton, it's been at Altrincham Arts Festival, haven't you, this year as well? So
yeah,
I've not been able to get on that this year because I've been too busy with all the stuff. I want to certainly go for them next year. So what did you do there this year then?
Yeah, so they had an event on called Reverb, and it was really cool because it was at this, like, it's called the Not So Secret Garden in Altrincham, because it's literally slap bang in the middle. And yeah, it was a really nice event. We were all just like reading our poems. Like it has a great variety. They had a lot of comedy poems there, which I really appreciate, because even though I love the poetry events I go to like in the city, a lot of them are like very serious poems. I sound very hypocritical. My poems are very serious poems, but I like to hear comedy poems as well. And yeah, it was a really good event, and we've got another one coming up that's going to be, it's in a place called, it's called Into the Woods. No, that's the name of the musical.
No. So there's a night going. There was a night going at, because I think if my memory is correct, Steve Smythe who's is the host for Speakeasy, actually read that he did. Yeah, so I'm sure Steve mentioned that to me as well. So that's why. So it's certainly nice. I'd like to get on myself in the future. So anyway, yeah, no, sound like Tilly had a great time with that.
Yeah,
now,
and sorry,
pardon me. Sorry, go on. Ladies
first. I was just gonna say this next event sounds good because it's actually going to be like whatever the place is called, I will remember it later, but it's going to be like in an actual like forest, which is like the coolest space ever for me to like perform a poem. Like that's so cool.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Yeah, great. Now the most recent thing I think that where you've done, well, you did some work with Young Identity, didn't you? As a facilitator for support in the steering group. Now tell us about that experience.
Yeah, so it's like two things. So I'm part of the steering group, which is basically like a planning group. It's like we're not the core group that makes all the decisions, but we're the ones who they give the decisions to, and they say like, you're actually young people who are part of the group. What do you think about this? Should we do these events? Like, what's like the future of the organization? And then the workshop facilitating. So I've been an assistant for that. And it's basically like co-running the workshops with someone who's been a facilitator for like a long time and like learning how to do it basically.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. When you get a chance to a good workshop to anybody, I've been running them one way or another for about 15 years or so now. And it's great because it gave me great pleasure when I started doing my last load. And Amanda and my wife had never done that before. And it was great fun seeing her get the first experience like you did. And it's something, I think when you see how you can help people, it's brilliant, isn't it?
Honestly, it's so like the workshops that I've helped out have been like so creative. Like I've been doing them with a girl called Ella, and they've all been like so like physical. Like we've got ones with like chalk and making tiny books and just all sorts of like.
Oh wow!
We had a typewriter one time. Like they're just also like physical, and like that's what I love doing. Like when in future when I get to like be the main facilitator, I really want to do like a workshop based off like games and stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely do it. Fun. Definitely do it. Nice, pleasure that one because I did one at the Shore Star Centre a few years ago, and that was when I was teaching 6 and 7-year-olds how to write poetry, and I was doing it all through physical movement and stuff like that, and it was like. Because I'm completely uncoordinated, the parents actually love me even more for this. So yeah, no, it's worth the experience. In that case, I'm always a believer with creativity. I think you're definitely at this stage. You will be at this stage yourself, and you are now. It's like there's so much more you can give apart from just writing poetry. I think.
Yeah, you learn from like teaching as well, like definitely, and it's really different to be a facilitator rather than a participant, but it's also really interesting. I should probably fully explain what Young Identity is. I feel like I've referenced it multiple times without actually explaining. So it's basically a writing group. We meet 3 times a week at the moment. So Monday at home, Tuesday at the Central Library, and Wednesday in Old Trafford, at Limelight in Old Trafford. All the information's on their Instagram account, but basically they're free workshops for young people aged 14 to 25, and they're fantastic. They're great.
See, now look at that, Lassie. You can't do a better plug on that straight away. So now, obviously, Lauren, we're coming to the end of the chat bit now anyway, so we're going to get you to a few poems in a few minutes for us. But before we get on to that, I always like to ask people, what plans do you have next for your creativity? What direction do you see your work going, say, in the next 5 years?
I think I want to prioritize my prose more, because poetry is like so it's not easy to make a perfect poem, but it's easy to write a poem. And when you feel like your time's limited and you've got all this stuff going on in life, it's so much easier to write poems. But I'm really passionate about the book that I'm writing. I just need to find the time to work on it. And also the play, I really want to work on the play. That's like this year is like the book, next year is the play.
Do it.
Yeah, and as well I want to write a poetry collection. I'm working with my friend Eva Lewis. They're also a poet, and like slowly over time we are building this collection. It's like we're constantly sending each other our work to like edit all the time, so it's like we're unintentionally building the collection together. And yeah, I want to do more teaching as well, like more workshop facilitating, definitely.
Now do it. Openly encourage you, definitely with that. So now, obviously, Lauren, if people want to find out more about you, where do you recommend that they go?
Most of my stuff I post on my Instagram, so it's Lauren Temple Poet. I don't really tend to post anything else except for poetry stuff, so that's the best place to find me. Got my link tree with any events or videos or anything on there as well.
No, fair play. Good luck with it, definitely. So now, that be it for the chat bit anyway. So I want to give you plenty of time to do some of your poems today for people. So we'll wrap up this part now, Lauren.
Oh,
Let you
thank you.
take
It's
a
been
quick
great.
pause. Yeah, I've loved it as well. Been really interesting tonight because
Yeah.
it's always good, people, to tip people and say, and I'm sure you'd agree with this, Lauren, before we conclude, is I didn't actually know you were dyspraxic and dyslexic.
Mhm.
This is what till you told me just off mic before, and I didn't know you've got that
Yeah.
neurodiverse book. So that's why it's been fascinating today. Thank you for that.
Yeah. No, it's okay. It's been great. Yeah.
Yeah, a pleasure. So, right, we'll see you all in a minute, guys.